What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and on this episode of the podcast, we are actually going to look at creating strategic flare-ups. Now, what does that mean? When you think of the idea of a flare-up, you think it's probably something that you want to avoid, something that you don't want to happen, especially if you've been dealing with them for months to years at a time. And a flare-up is basically when you get an increase in pain, an increase in tightness. And at a very basic level, what's happening is the nervous system is reacting in a protective way to stop you from doing something because it feels that you're going to get injured. Now, oftentimes, flare-ups can be very beneficial, because if you sprain an ankle, and you could call that a flare-up in your ankle where everything swells up, you get a lot of inflammation for a couple of days, and it stops you from moving it. That's a very effective method at the start. But when you look at a chronic injury like a recurring back pain or a sciatica or a bulging disc that's giving you trouble, or a recurring shoulder pain and a recurring neck, knee or hip pain, where the flare-ups are actually stopping you from living the quality of life that you want to live, then it's a problem. Now we have a bigger issue. And with the people that I deal with, and many of the ones that listen to this podcast, as I know, are people who are dealing with these recurring back pains and dealing with recurring issues, recurring injuries, and they want to get back to exercise and want to get back to a healthy, active lifestyle, and also want to start to achieve goals that they may have felt before weren't achievable. And as I'll talk through this episode, I want you to see if it resonates with you a little bit around the mindsets that maybe create these flare-ups. What happened, I guess it's easier to even say the mindset that sprouts up when the flare-up happens, as well as how we deal with it. Now, this idea of creating a strategic flare-up is actually a concept that we use in the Back Pain, Back to Exercise group program. And it's a concept that I use with all of my one-to-one clients, especially the ones who are dealing with the chronic injuries. It's a pretty simple one in a lot of ways, but it may be new to you. You may not have heard it before, and you may not understand why you would do it. So I'm going to take this podcast and I'm going to talk about these issues. And you can literally take this podcast and apply it to your life, apply it to fixing the injury. That's my goal, is you'll be able to take it and you can apply it and you can start to work on it, and then a little bit of feedback will go a long way. Now, for anyone that is interested, I'm going to just drop it at the start. Our next group program for the Back Pain Back to Exercise group is starting on the 25th of March. Right now we have an early bird offer, so it's €100 off. Generally the price is $297. Right now you can get it for $197 if you jump on board. Now, I'm only going to be taking a limited number of people for the early bird, and maximum for this group, there's going to be 30 people in it. So make sure to jump on that early if you are interested in it. I will drop the link in the description of this podcast and you can sign up straight away. When you do sign up, you get access to all the materials and you can be working on them. And then as a group, we kick off with the Q&As, the live trainings, all of the extras on the 25th of March. But for the people who already, let's say in the last group, the ones who signed up early had such a head start when we got started that they had been through maybe one or two cycles, and they were able to, their idea of what was going on was way ahead of the other people who were already in the group. Now, everyone did catch up, but by the time the early birds who had signed up, they were already breaking PRs in the gym, they were already getting back into running, they were already exercising a lot more. And then what we were doing is we were tweaking. So there's a lot of benefit to taking advantage of the early bird right now, so you can get started early and build for the next couple of weeks. And you can always shoot me messages while you're going through it as well on Instagram. There's no issue with that. But to jump into this podcast, this is a concept, as I said, that I use to overcome all types of different chronic injuries, and to my knowledge I haven't seen anyone else using this concept to this level. But then again, there's not many other people who just target a specific chronic back issue or chronic injury like this, so it's my full focus really at the moment. It's a proven framework. When applied, it can get you back to exercise. It'll improve your relationship with your body. It'll specifically target the burn spots. Anyone who's listened to this podcast for a while understands that there's burn spots on the nervous system that flare up when you deal with a chronic injury is one that comes back and it keeps coming back for, let's say, if you get an injury at the start, that's grand. If you get an ankle sprain, this is how when people ask me, how do you work online as a physio? This is the easiest way to explain it. If you get an ankle sprain, okay, and you still have that ankle sprain 6 months to a year later, the actual ankle sprain is healed up and you're dealing with another issue instead. It's a burn spot on your nervous system is the easiest way. to explain it. Now, it depends on a lot of different factors, but that's the simplest way to explain it. And these chronic injuries, which are my main focus right now, are dictated by this burn spot where the threshold to pain on your nervous system has changed. And now every time you do an exercise and it touches off that burn spot, it flares it up and you get a load of pain and tightness. Even though you haven't re-injured the area, you've just aggravated this area with a lower threshold to pain, because we can have pain without injury. It's really important to remember that. So this idea of creating strategic flare-ups specifically targets those burn spots. What we do is we cause these mini strategic flare-ups with the goal of controlling it, improving tolerance, and then fixing the poor behaviors that are causing that to reoccur. And that's a simple way of looking at it. There's a lot more to it, but I'm going to give you the general outlook, or the kind of the 100-foot view, so that you have the principles of what to work on, why you want to do it, and how you can do it. And then you can start to apply this to your own life. So first off, you need to actually understand your case specifically. And this is why in the Back Pain Back to Exercise program, there's a massive portion of it that we focus on reflection and education. It's not just do these exercises and fix your issue. We look a lot at the education side of things, and we look a lot at the reflection on the flare-ups that we're having and the ones we've had in the past. Because if you don't know what variables are actually affecting you, and what other factors are causing your pain to kick up and causing your nervous system to get really sensitive and trigger this burn spot, it's very difficult to control it. And then every flare-up that you get actually feels really random. So it's like, oh geez, I just bent down to pick up a pen, or I leaned across the table to grab a cup, and everything flared off. It's like, that doesn't make sense when you think about it logically. You should be able to reach across the table and pick up a cup that's only 500 grams, and there shouldn't be any issue with that. You should be able to bend down and pick a bag up off the ground, or you should be able to exercise without everything kicking back and your body fighting against you. Okay? So when you don't understand it, it does seem like it's a random occurrence. It seems like, okay, I just randomly got a flare up, I was doing everything right, and it all kicked off. But when you have a framework to work through, to actually understand the interplay of these factors, whether that be the stress in your life or your relationships, how your sleep deprivation for a couple of nights has affected it, maybe your mindset around the way you're thinking or your mood, maybe your activity during the week and your movement, or there could be something coming up, so there's a bit of anticipation and anxiety around that. All of these other things are going to play a huge role, and it's important to understand these things, because the more you understand them, the easier it is to fix them. Okay, so having that framework to work through, to understand the interplay between the contributing factors, is massive. And as I said earlier on, reflection and hindsight are your keys to fixing this here, because hindsight is always 20/20. Sometimes when a flare-up happens, you don't really understand what's going on. Like recently, I was working with a lady, and she had a flare-up, and she didn't know what was going on. And at the time, she wasn't able to pick out too many specific things. But afterwards, I asked her, well, have you been through any emotional issues? Are you having any trouble with anything emotionally at the moment? And she said no. Or sorry, I said this to her at the time. She said no. And then afterwards, we kept on talking, and it cropped up that she had just broken up with her long-term boyfriend, literally the week before. Now, if that isn't an emotional factor that could contribute to a sensitive nervous system and a low mood and sleep deprivation and everything around it, I don't know what it is, okay? Because that's a huge one for people. And we don't sometimes understand the effect that can have on it if we don't know that they can be linked. And generally, a lot of times we don't know that they can be linked. So reflection and hindsight is excellent here. And once we figured that out, we were like, okay, well, that was a really, really big stressor you had in your life at the time. And then there's certain things you can do to calm it down and to offload and disconnect and all these other ways of improving that. But without knowing that could have played a role, you will stop everything because you feel like, okay, well, I'm after doing something wrong here, when really your nervous system has just become really, really sensitive. So when you understand it, and you understand your case specifically, you understand your triggers and you understand what contributes to it, all you have to do is start controlling those. So it becomes much more controlled. Now, when you're proactive in controlling it, this is the next phase. This is the thing that people miss out on a lot of times, is the flare-ups and the pain are really bad. Obviously, they're a huge issue. But the fear around the pain and the anticipation of the next flare-up is what a lot of people report as way worse, because you're always living in this state of anxiety of when's it going to happen. I would love to get back to the gym, but I don't want to cause a flare-up again. I would love to do that with you, one of your friends, or go for a hike, or go for a run, or do whatever, start a new exercise class, but I want to make sure that I don't hurt my back. And these are really common conversations that people have. They have it with me, they have it with themselves, they have it with their partners. They're really common, and what you don't understand there is that your issue or injury is actually controlling you. And what we want to do is we want to start being proactive about controlling it. Okay, so the only way you can do that is you can start to understand it a little bit more. And when you understand the variables, you can work on those specifically. So you're start being proactive as opposed to being reactive. Because when you're reactive to these things, you don't realize it in the moment until somebody highlights it for you. And that's the good thing about these group scenarios, is that someone can say something and I can say, wait a second. That's a reactive response, and we're able to clear it up. Only last week, we had a lady who pulled back from everything, where she was like, okay, no, I'm just going to stop for a couple of weeks and wait for this flare up to calm down. And I had a little bit of a laugh. I was thinking, that's hilarious, because we were just talking about making sure that we keep on top of this. And when the flare-ups happen, we were just talking about creating the strategic ones. And once we said it, then she had a bit of a laugh about it, and she was able to say, okay, geez, I didn't even realize that was a bad behavior. That was a bad habit that started to take over. And she started to work on it, and then it started to improve. So she knew then that there were certain variables that were causing that. So it is so important that you need to understand the variables and then be proactive about controlling them. Now, the goal is to remove fear around the flare-ups. Like, that's a huge goal when you're looking at creating a strategic flare-up, because what you're doing is you're controlling the variables, and then you're building on your exercise, or you're building on your routine outside of that, and you're managing it until something kicks off a little bit, because you want to find where your limit is. Okay, and the reason being is that when you find your limit and things kick off, there's certain things you can do to calm it down. But when you have this control over it, when you know that you are the one who set that off, and it didn't just randomly happen, that removes a lot of the fear around it. Because let's just look at this scenario for a second, okay? When you get a flare up, what happens is the fear of pain starts to drive bad behaviors. And bad behaviors are when you start eating painkillers, you start looking for short-term fixes, you start catastrophizing about, oh my God, what's going to happen? This could get worse and worse. I might need to get surgery. This is the worst injury I've ever had. I can't believe it. I can't do anything. I can't roll out of bed. I can't lift my head off the pillow. I can't bend down. I can't do anything. And you start catastrophizing everything and building in your head. Your nervous system keeps ramping up and up and up and up. And the pain then, as a result, starts to increase even more. Okay, so this is a very, very natural phenomenon. You can do this with any injury. If you crack your back, or if you crack your knee, and then you start really overthinking the crack and really, really focusing on it, you will notice that you can start to get pain, and you will notice that you can start to get swelling, because with pain oftentimes comes inflammation, even if there's no injury. So you can actually do this to yourself, unbeknownst to yourself. And that's what happens with these chronic injuries, is we start to catastrophize when it happens, and then we don't realize it, and the pain starts to increase even more. So we're reinforcing what's going on. And then the cycle starts again. Okay, so we get this cycle of, all right, the pain kicks up, we start taking the short-term fixes, we start catastrophizing, and we take the 2 weeks off, like I was saying with that lady. We take a 2-week layoff, and we say, okay, I need to wait for this to calm down. Now, with that 2-week layoff, you are so hesitant afterwards to get back into it, because now your fear is gone even higher. Your anticipation is even higher, and you start to lack the confidence in your body. Now, when you start to lack the confidence in your body, that's a psychological response, obviously, or an emotional response, you could say. But then you'll stop doing certain things that will actually improve it, like certain forms of exercise and activity. And what happens then? You start to decondition a little bit more. Okay, so you can see now that it starts to build and build and build. What'll happen? You decondition. As a result, your burn spot, or your threshold lowers, and now you can get flare-ups by doing very, very, very little at all, where it could be literally you just want to roll out of bed and now you have serious pain. The other thing with that is you start looking for new solutions. When you don't understand that it's a nervous system that's a lower level, you'll start continually looking for these biomechanical solutions. You'll look for, okay, it's my posture, it's my bulging discs, it's my glutes, it's the way I walk, it's because I have flat feet, it's because I was sitting in the car seat wrong, it's because I sleep wrong. You have all these random diagnoses that have nothing to do with it, and you start to blame those. If it was your flat feet, it would have happened to you 30 years ago, not today. That's the thing. What people say, like, when you're dealing with a chronic injury, it has to be. If you okay, here's a simple one. Go back to the ankle sprain. If you sprain your ankle and you get pain in your knee a week later, there's a possibility that the ankle sprain and the knee pain is related, because it's an acute change in your mechanics, and then the load in your knee changes. You actually get it a lot that when you sprain your ankle, the muscles on the side, the peroneals, take over, okay? And you start to get pain there. That's an acute response in a biomechanical change, because your body has changed slightly. It's acute. Now, if you sprain your ankle when you're 12, that's not giving you back pain when you're 35. I don't care what people say. It doesn't happen. It would have happened back then. It doesn't happen now because it's the mechanical change that acutely that affects it. But the body's so strong and adaptive that over time we will adapt to these new positions. We will get strong. The body will only give you pain as a protective mechanism, or when the system is really hypersensitized to pain. So when you start looking for these new solutions, as all the ones that I've mentioned before, that will feed back in, because then you're going to try something else and say, okay, well, this didn't work. So that's why we use the idea of, we're going to create a strategic flare-up, and then we're going to fix it. We're going to control it, and we're going to improve it. And then we're going to create another one, and we're not going to look for a new diagnosis, because we know we're the ones who created it in the first place, because we want to continue increasing the tolerance. That's how simple it is. And that's what we're doing. So I know when it sounds like, okay, I'm making it out to sound simpler than it is, but it is actually a pretty simple technique. You can create these cycles. I've been doing it for years with people. It's such an effective way to make progress. You would be so surprised. Think about it this way. If every single time that you got DOMS, which is delayed onset muscle soreness, when you went to the gym and you took 2 weeks off after every single time you went back, would you ever make progress in the gym? You wouldn't. Okay, you wouldn't make any progress in the gym, and the reason being is that you're waiting for the body's responding. You're stressing the body. It's responding, and you're deciding, okay, well, I'm just going to let that control completely. Now, the thing is, we need to understand that there's a huge amount of pain that's dictated by how we think and how bad we think it is, because that hypes the nervous system even more. But that's going to really stunt your progress. Okay, so we need to, if you get DOMS, you go back in, you go a little easier, or you change the muscle group. It's simple as. Okay, so you're looking at like a body up approach, but you need to have the discipline to know to do that in a lot of cases. And that's why these group programs are really good, because you create a strategic flare up. You can still, I don't care, you can still go and you can still lose a run of yourself, or you can still get all hyped up, or you can still get really anxious and like get really scared about what's going on. I don't mind. That happens to everyone. It happens to all of us. But the thing about it is, you highlight that, we know that's going to happen, and then we fix it. Otherwise, you get a flare up, you create it, you completely catastrophize, you make everything worse. We don't do anything. We wait 2 weeks, you get a new scan, you get a new whatever it is, a new diagnosis, and you try to fix that. So when I say I don't care, what I mean is, we're going to cause it, and then we're going to fix it. It's not that I don't care. I understand that it's going to cause pain, and I understand that it's going to be a difficult time, but we do have to do it to improve. And the reason that we have to do it is because we want to avoid this layoff, and we want to avoid these uncontrolled reactions. Okay, as I was saying, where you just jump and let fear control all of your actions. If we can dictate that, if we can make that change, and we can do it consistently, we can fix it. Like, I've seen it so many times. That's exactly how you do it. Okay, so the last thing is, let's just look at it now. So we know the first two steps. The first two steps is you're building it up, you're controlling the variables, you're letting it flare, and then you're being proactive in controlling it. Now the flare up calms down. You haven't taken 2 weeks off. You're still in your flow. You're still moving, you're still grooving, you're still getting through everything. So you're still making a lot of progress. And it's the same as when DOMS goes away. If you took that 2 weeks off, you're probably going to get DOMS again when you get back into it. So do you take another 2 weeks off? No, you don't. You continue to work. Now you're actually 2 weeks ahead of what you would have been before, because you were aggressive with it, because you were proactive with it, and you weren't reactive. Now you're way ahead of where you could be. So what happens as a result is your confidence in yourself improves massively. You start to get this confidence of, well, I caused that flare up in the first place, and I controlled it. So I don't care about the next flare up, because when the next flare up happens, I'm going to do the same thing anyway. I'm going to cause it, and I'm going to control it. That's just the way it is. And I'm going to continue to build my tolerance. Here's a really simple example of how you can create a strategic flare up. You know that when you run 3K, it flares up. Okay, perfect. All you need to do when you control that flare up is run 3.1 or 3.2. And now you have seen it, let's say 3.3. Now you have a 10% improvement on what you could do before. But if you didn't have that measure, if you didn't know that you were causing the flare up strategically, you would just say, okay, the flare up happened. Now the flare up happened again at 4K. You wouldn't make any connection that there was an improvement of a kilometer there, which is a 30% improvement or 35% improvement, whatever it is, 40% actually, 33. You wouldn't make that connection. So you'd say, okay, I need to stop everything. I need to change it. But when you do make that connection, when you do know that you're the one who's doing it, it's so much easier. So you're 2 weeks ahead. And the other thing is, as I said before, you have the old bad habits of you taking the painkillers, you're looking for a new diagnosis, you're looking for short-term fixes, you're looking to try to get rid of it straight away. Those habits aren't reinforced. Instead, you have positive behaviors that are reinforced, where it's positive mindset that's reinforced, where the control is there, where the habits are there. You know what to do. You know where okay, I need to focus on sleep. I need to focus on mood. I need to disconnect. I need to maybe increase my activity, or I may need to just actually come back and really focus on just getting a couple of days that I can control everything around me and I can relax and I let this thing pass over. Now you have the confidence to deal with the next flare up when it happens, as well as you have a higher tolerance because you stay going. So flare-ups don't happen at the same level twice. They don't happen at the 3K and then the 3K again, unless there's some other crazy variable that you haven't controlled, where you go for a run at the 3K, you sleep only 5 hours the night before, and then you go for a run at 3K again. Then you're most likely going to get a flare-up at that same level. But if you've controlled those factors, you can improve it. So now you have basically understood what's causing it, then you decide to go after it and you cause it. You control the controllables and you start to be proactive about working and improving the flare-up. After that, the flare-up calms down, you continue to make progress, you build, you have a good idea, okay, the pain doesn't always mean injury, so you start to get more confident in your body, the pain doesn't flare up as bad next time, and you repeat the cycle. And what the goal to do here is that you want to create smaller feedback circles so that you have a lot more control of, okay, I know I can build up here just to the edge of a flare up and I can pull back, because you start to get a really good body awareness of, okay, I can feel it actually kicking up a little bit here, so now I change this factor. I feel it's going to kick up, now I'm going to make sure for the next 3 nights that I sleep really well. I feel it's going to kick up, now I'm going to focus on hydration. I'm going to change the exercise that I'm doing. I'm going to maybe go for longer walks. I'm going to spend a bit of time in nature when I feel it's going to kick up. These are the things that you can do that really help it. And when you're repeating the cycle and you're creating these smaller feedback circles, you can improve it so much faster. And that's why I have people that say to me all the time, especially ones that I'm working with, that I'm even still working with to this day, who haven't had a flare up in 2 or 3 years because they've used this cycle, and now they have run marathons, they've climbed mountains, they have joined into these long elite races with their family, or they have done some crazy obstacle course with their family and friends, and they're not afraid of their back. They're not living in fear of their back anymore because they've done this consistently, and now they have the confidence to deal with it consistently. Why are they still working with me? Because we continue to push the goals. We continue to test the boundaries of what they want to do, because now they know that with this idea of stress and adaptation and improving their body, they don't have these flare-ups. They're not living in fear, as I said, of a back injury, and they can really kind of push the limits of what they want to do. And their quality of life improves massively. So there's so many more benefits to this. Mental health, physical health, there's so much to it that if you can get it right and you can be consistent, you can really make a change to your life. Just a couple of things to note at the end here. There are both physical and psychological barriers holding you back from overcoming this issue that you're dealing with. You may only address the physical. Now it's time to start looking at the psychological, start to look at the emotional, and start to look at the physical or the spiritual as well. There is more to this. Only addressing the physical with a body up approach is going to get you so far. But if every time you address the physical and you don't take care of the repeating psychological patterns that are driving the bad behaviors, it doesn't matter about the physical, because you're going to take those 2 weeks off, you're going to take those 3 weeks off, and you're going to get deconditioned, and you're going to have to start from the same position and build it up again. It's going to cause this burn spot to stay around much longer, and that's what you're trying to go after, is the nervous system, not the body. That's the goal. That's what you're trying to work on. Make it less protective and make it more relaxed. If you don't address both, you can cause the negative cycles. The negative cycles will cause limiting beliefs in what you feel you can do, which I'm sure you have a ton of them right now, but you don't even realize it, where you say, I can't do this because of my back can flare up if I do this. You may even say, I have a bad back. That's a huge one. I have a bad back, I can't do this. My family always had a bad back. These are other limiting beliefs that always crop up, and these will delay your recovery. On the opposite side, if you do create these strategic flare-ups, if you do know, okay, because I can literally tell you when you jump on week 5 and 6, you're going to have a flare-up. I've done this so many times that I know it. I can say that on week 5 or 6, you're probably going to start getting a bit of discomfort, and we can manage that. And sometimes people will forget that, and it'll happen, and they'll say, oh, that was random. And I'll say, look, we knew it was going to happen around this 5, 6 or 7. We knew it was going to happen. Now we manage it, and then we build for the couple of weeks after that. But if you don't know that, you're going to stop at week 6. You're going to drop everything, and then you're going to look for a new solution when the solution is right in front of you. And all you have to do is manage it and work through these obstacles. And you only have how many times you have to do this? It depends per person. It depends on how you do it, but every single time you do it, you get better at it, and you become more comfortable in it. And long term, then you can just build and build and build, and then you'll actually have forgotten about it. Like one guy I was working with who said, geez, I haven't had a flare up in 2 years. He hadn't even considered that. He hadn't thought about it because his goals were set in front of him of what he was trying to work on. So that it is important to do it. It makes a huge difference, and hopefully I can get the point across to you that if you are consistent with it, you can make the change, and you can change your life. You can have a completely different quality of life and a completely different mindset and way to live. But you do have to take the steps, and you do have to commit. And when it gets tough, you know this is what hard feels like, and you continue to work anyway. But that's all from me today. Thank you so much for listening in again. If anyone is interested in it, check out the link and make sure to jump on the early bird while it's still available. As I said, once I hit the number, it's going to be like it's a fixed number. Once I hit that, I'm going to go for the normal pricing again, and maximum, we're only having 30 people in this group. So we've already had people who've jumped on board. Make sure to get involved early. If you have any questions, you can shoot me a message on Instagram at Mobility Tutor, or you can send me an email at info@themobilitytutor.com, whatever's easiest for you. I hope everyone's doing well. If you did enjoy this podcast, I would love, please, if you could rate the podcast. I want to get it up to 1,000 ratings on Spotify, because it goes a long way in promoting it, and I just like the number of 1,000 ratings. I think it's cool, as I said, it will help me get on better guests as well when they see that. And all you have to do is just scroll up to the top of this on Spotify in the rebalance and click 5 stars, whatever you want there. 5 stars would be great though if you could. I appreciate that though. Thank you so much. I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one.